Welcome back to the Owatonna Today Show, your community connection, and we hope you enjoyed visiting with the Owatonna Woodcarvers. We have here in the studio Jared Hendricks from the Owatonna Public Utilities. Hey Jared, how are you?
Well, and yourself?
And I understand you're going to be speaking with us today on safe drinking water.
Safe drinking water, specifically the concerns that have been arisen lately about lead in drinking water.
Jared, for those who may not know, why don't you let them know what your title is at OPU and what your daily duties entail?
Sure. Jared Hendricks, Owatonna Public Utilities. I'm the Marketing and Energy Conservation Officer at OPU. So a lot of my tasks involve the rebates that we have, helping to calculate energy savings for our customers. I work mostly with our commercial customers, but also handle some of the residential rebates as well. And then some of the marketing that goes around that, and then things like this as well.
Okay. Do you have a special passion for utilities work, or is it just learning as you go? Or
my passion is in numbers. I've always been kind of an energy nerd, as I've been told, so it kind of fits.
Okay, great. So what can you tell us about, with all this talk in Michigan about the lead in the water, safe drinking water issues are in the news, so there's something that's very close in the news perspective to us. So would you share with our viewers what Owatonna Public Utilities is doing?
Sure. Well, one of the things I want to first point out is that we do a consumer confidence report every year. You might remember that it used to be called the Water Quality Report, and I think that name was a little bit misleading. It wasn't necessarily talking about the quality of water, but assuring consumers that the water is safe and that they have access to all the information to see what tests we're performing and where those tests do fall in line. And it also shows what kind of levels at which a utility would need to take action. So from that, I think the next thing is, what action level would be, or where would the lead levels need to be in Owatonna for an action level? And in Owatonna, that'd be, in Minnesota, and I believe in the United States, it's 15 parts per billion. So we'll just use the number 15. We'll use that parts per billion the whole time. To put that into perspective, when we're talking about the lead that's been reported in the Flint water, there have been reports over 100, there have been reports over 500. The highest report I did find from the Virginia Tech study was 13,200. So to put that in perspective, we would have to take action at 15, but in Flint, Michigan, they did have reports that were upwards of 13,000.
And the Owatonna OPU, you abide by the Minnesota Department of Health and EPA mandates and recommendations
Correct.
for water standards. So that's where you set your bar.
Correct.
Okay.
So, and let me make sure to say too that we are not at 15 parts per billion here in Owatonna. We're not even close to that. And it's not the water that we're pumping and delivering that gets lead, and lead isn't naturally occurring in water sources. So when we pump it out of the ground, or if you're taking surface water, it's not already in the water. What happens is corrosion in pipes and leaded solder, leaded service lines, water that's sitting idle and around any of those things is what can have lead problems. With the lead will absorb into water that's sitting idle with those things. It's not going through the mains collecting lead. It's not being pumped out of the ground with lead. What happens is once it gets into a home or a place that it's going to be sitting idle, that's where it can absorb that lead. And that's where we measure our tests from, is the consumer taps.
Okay. Now, is there ways that could you educate our residents that are viewing on ways to mitigate the potential risks?
Sure. There's always a potential risk. We want to make sure that everybody's educated properly. There's a great article that we have on our website called Let It Run, Get the Lead Out. It's a Minnesota Department of Health article that we have on our website, and we display it at the fair. It's a wonderful article. It talks about what you can do. And the first and foremost thing that you can do to help mitigate your risks of lead in your drinking water is, before you take water for drinking or for cooking, turn your cold faucet on for 60 seconds. So just run the water for a minute. That sounds like, well, that's a waste of water, and unfortunately it can be. So the other thing they recommend is, if you have concerns of lead, don't take just a glass full of water. Fill a jug or two of water up after you've ran it for 60 seconds. You can put that in the fridge. Then next time you want a little water, you can take that out of your fridge if you're concerned about the lead in the water in your house.
What are some other tips you can give towards that?
Well, again, The lead isn't coming from the water that we pump. So if you are concerned that you might have a lead service line, you can check with a contractor to see if you have a lead service line. If you do, you can have that replaced. That would be at an expense to the customer, but there are grants out there that Minnesota offers to help pay for that. Of course, we want as many lead service lines out as we can. That's where the greatest risk is at, is after it comes off the main, the customer-owned piping could be lead for a period underground. Getting that replaced would greatly reduce the risk. As well as any new plumbing you're doing, make sure you're looking for fixtures that have low lead compliance. The law requires low lead compliance, but you can find some fixtures that are lower in lead. Of course, you can't get lead out of things like brass. There's always going to be some lead in brass, but if you find fixtures that are of different materials that don't have as much lead, that can help as well.
Okay. So it's not coming from the source.
It's not coming from
the source to the faucet somewhere. Something happened.
Yep.
Some of the processes you mentioned. So my question would be, is there an age of home, a cutoff age in a home where you might want to have your piping? Was there a certain year houses were built that they used lead piping in respects to, you know, we have some homes here that were turn of the century, you know.
And we do have some very old homes in town here. Most, at least as we're aware, most lead service lines in town have been replaced already. If you had a lead service line, you'd want to get it out right away. If you were made aware of that, you'd want to take the steps to do it. So most people already have done that. So I can't say that there's a hard date where if your home's newer than this, you don't need to be concerned. If your home's older than this, you should be concerned. I can't say that that is true. You know, homes of any age could have risks. So it's always just important to double check, know what you have.
Mm-hmm. So would you encourage someone who just may have that question a little more in depth about their particular home, would you have them call the OPU and have a conversation, or what would you recommend? I
think I would recommend them calling a contractor, somebody that can come out. Unfortunately, OPU isn't going to know all the specifics of your home versus my home versus somebody else's home. But those contractors can come in, take a look if you would ask them to, and help you determine what types of risks you might have. They'll help you determine if you've got a lead service line or if you've got leaded solder in your house. And then you can have some of that risk mitigated. Again, fixtures are going to be the easier thing to replace. A lead service line would be costly, but that is a very important thing to replace if you had one. But again, even if you have those, letting the water run is the easiest way to mitigate risk.
Okay. And there's newer regulations now that were put in place in 2015.
Yep.
And some of those are low lead requirements.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Could you share some of those with us?
Sure. So leaded solder has been outlawed in Minnesota, and that's been actually since the 80s. But in 2015, additional low lead requirements went into effect for the sales of fixtures. So faucets, taps, different things like that, there's a lower lead requirement in them now. Again, we're not going to be able to get all of the lead out at this time. We're working closer and closer to that all the time, but it's much lower levels. And so you're going to see things on the packaging that might say low lead or different compliances like that. And from 2015, they can no longer sell some of the fixtures that do not meet those requirements.
So this has been on the radar for over 20 years now with this water pipes since 1985, and now there's been new products out there because they recognize that can be an issue.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Lead has always been a concern. We've always been trying to mitigate it. It's just been kind of pushed to the forefront with recent incidences, and that's why we want to be here to just ensure everybody that the water in Owatonna is safe. We do not have lead concerns in Owatonna. If you're looking to see what levels look like, you know, go to our website, go look at the Consumer Confidence Report. We'll have the 2015 one out on July 1st of this year. We do have it out by July 1st every year. It's an annual report that we update, and in fact, we will be doing our next lead testing here in 2016.
Now, is there anything on that report that anyone would need assistance in understanding? Any kind of terminology, special terminology that's used?
You know, there's a few things on there that I had to have some questions answered on myself, in fact, when I was looking at it. So if you do have questions about it, you can call our office and we'll get you to somebody that can assist you with those questions if you're having concerns. Otherwise, take a look. There's a lot of explanation and definitions in there that I had overlooked originally, and taking an extra minute or two to look over those really helps.
Okay. Where does our water come from?
Our water comes from an underground aquifer. I'm going to forget the names. There's two different aquifers, and they're somewhere between 800 and 1,000 feet below the ground. And so it is a deep well aquifer that we're tapping into, not a surface water here in Owatonna.
I wonder how the settlers of Owatonna knew that. As you're saying that, I'm sitting here thinking, wow, was that by chance?
That's a really wonderful question to ask. That is a really wonderful question. Of course, the waterworks started in the late 1800s in Owatonna here. So we started drilling wells back around the turn of the century here.
So we're doing good. We're doing good, and you just want to assure everybody that. Some of your sources for this were from the Virginia Tech research team, frequently asked questions, so they can also go out there, correct?
There's also research you can do as well.
Right.
Of course, when I was trying to provide this article, I wanted to make sure that I had proper numbers, especially when I was trying to put into perspective the difference between what an action level is and where the Flint, Michigan levels are. Again, we're substantially lower than that here in Owatonna. Okay. And just assuring everybody it's not the water that we're pumping, it's the water that's sitting idle in areas like household plumbing.
So you're aware and you're on the watch, keeping our water supply safe.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Okay. Is there anything else before we close that you'd like anyone to know out there?
Again, always feel free. We are your municipal electric, water, and gas utility. So we're here to ask questions of and answer those for you.
Great. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
We will take a short break to hear a word from our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Please stay with us.